Hey, that actually is kind of neat. Good morning, everybody. Toby Stinson here with Dallas Head Transportation Museum. We're doing a staff collections training on what I find to be one of the really amazingly significant vehicle in our collection. The museum's 1908 Overland. And Overland is a automobile name that is no longer with us as a mark, but has an extremely significant history and has a running through the 20th century. If you work backwards, a lot of people, today's most connection might be Jeep. Had connections with the Kaiser Corporation. Willys Overland is a name that stands out a lot and is involved. But we're coming kind of back to the beginning of the Overland company. And before we get into the vehicle itself, I think it's really important. One of the things we're doing here at Dallas Head is a huge movement to really focus on the technology and education and how things tie in. But, you know, when we're looking at any artifact, there's three things that always kind of have to come into place. You always have to look at the technology. And what is it? How's it work? Where's it come about, etc. You always have to look at what I always call, even though I taught history, I call place and time. Place and time involves history, the present, and the future. All aspects of those ways. Okay, and then the most important part, which we forget about, is really the people. And the people are really what matter in the development of anything we progress as a society. When you get that, then you have your context. Then you go back and relook at things again. I love looking at people because you have people, you're going to have drama. And if you have drama, you're going to have conflicts, and then you're going to have soap operas. In reality, that's what kind of happens. So we're here with the 1908 Overland, and I also need to start out by giving a great shout out to all my friends and people in the great state of Indiana. A lot of people looking back 100 years ago might not realize that Indiana was one of the early hotbeds of automotive technology and innovation. Think about the Great American Race Memorial Day weekend, the Indianapolis 500. Why is the Indianapolis 500 being created in the middle of the Midwest in 1911, 1912? Great museums. Go visit the Auburn-Korn-Duesenberg Museum in Auburn, Indiana. Go visit the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. Go visit the Studebaker Museum in South Bend, Indiana. And out of that world comes the Overland. The Overland was originally created by the Standard Wheel Company of Terra Haute, Indiana. They made wagon wheels, one of the largest producers of wagon wheels in the late 19th century. And anybody in the wagon business in the 19th century is making money hand over fist. South Bend, Indiana, Studebaker was the world's largest wagon producer. They had the largest single factory under one roof in the world. So wagons are really what's supporting a lot of industry, the railroad networks. But people see the writing on the wall, and the Standard Wheel Company decides, let's get involved in making automobiles because it's a new wave of the future. And they create an automobile line called the Overland, operated as a separate division. They played around with it. They made cars. In 1903, they made 11 cars. The next year, they made like 20-something. The next couple of years, they made like 40-something, and they were kind of playing around with it. They hired a new engineer that was just out of a Polytech school. His name was Claude Cox, and he moved to Indianapolis and then Terre Haute and started working with the Overland division. There are some other people that get involved in here. When you think about Overland, people obviously think about Willys. The name Willys comes from John North Willys. John North Willys was a man from Western New York, and he got into selling bicycles in the late 19th century because that was a fad. And he went to Cleveland in 1899, and he saw an automobile, and he caught the bug and said, that's what's going to be the future. He goes back to Elmira, New York, and opens a dealership. Okay, and he starts selling Overlands. In fact, in 1906, Overland made 47 cars. That's it. And John North Willys bought all 47 cars. And he became an investor in Overland. If you look at the name Overland, and now we've talked about his context with wagons, why the name Overland? Overland trail, overland travel, this car can go overland, and that's what we're looking at here. Mr. Cox buys Overland and then makes it his own company and then brings in another investor who also was a wagon manufacturer. His name was Mr. Parry, Claude Parry, and he had 51% of it. Okay, and then John North Willys is involved buying cars for his dealership in Elmira, New York. There's a panic depression in 1907, and Mr. Parry goes bankrupt, even loses his house, loses everything, and John North Willys goes to Indianapolis. By this point, they moved to Indianapolis from Terre Haute because he's worried about his investment and winds up buying the company. And in 1908, John North Willys has control of Overland. And in 1908, Overland goes from making 47, 50 cars in 1907 to in 1908, the first year that John North Willys owns and controls Overland, they went to 400 and something automobiles, 467 automobiles in 1 year. The next year in 1909, they jumped to 4,000 automobiles. So if you look at the impact that John North Willys had by being involved in Overland and then taking over, believing that the automobile was the wave of the future, they play 11 cars, 20 cars, 30 cars, 40 cars, whatever, 400 cars, 4,000 cars. John North Willys continued to develop the automobile, eventually moved them to Toledo, Ohio. The Pope Toledo Automobile Manufacturing Company was a high-end luxury automobile factory. They kind of went under. The factory was there in Toledo, Ohio. He moved it to Toledo, and then they continued to manufacture vehicles at a high rate. By 1912, Mr. Willys renamed the company Willys Overland. And that name is famous in American folklore and lexicon for a long, long time. He really turned the company around. From 1912, to put this in another context, from 1912 to 1918, Willys Overland was the second largest automobile producer in the United States, only behind Ford. And the Willys Overland story, that's a separate story for a different day. But there's a lot of people and pioneers that are involved with the Willys Overland story. For example, Walter Chrysler was involved with Willys Overland at one point. And it's an amazing story that goes through the 20s into the 40s. But back to this car, this is a 1908 Model 24. If you compare it, the best comparable I would say is compare it to a 1908, 1909, 1910 Model T Ford. Since Willys Overland was a huge competitor with Ford by 1912. The engine, we'll open it up here in a second. The engine is a 4-cylinder engine and extremely robust and powerful for its day. Depending on reports, this car had anywhere from 22 to 28 horsepower. It is not a single cast engine, like one singular block. If you look at a Model T Ford engine, the Model T Ford was one of the first cars to actually cast a whole cylinder block. This still has separate cylinders, cylinder jugs, so you'd have to take them off the individual block. It does have a pressurized oiling system. It has magneto ignition, which is quite advanced. It has a 2-speed planetary transmission. John Nesbitt mentions, like, hey, it's got 3 pedals. That's very standard for the time. A Ford and high gear, reverse pedal, and a brake. This is very common. This is what you would call a raceabout or a runabout. It's a 2-seater. You sit way back. It's relatively light. This car, if you look up underneath, has a really strong, robust frame. As you can see, the wheels should be sturdy and well built because they come from a wagon wheel background originally. It has 4 springs that are run longitudinally with the frame. So instead of, if you look at a Model T, it only has 2 springs that run transverse, so it'll rock with the roads. This one is really robust. These 4 springs really provide a much more stable ride and handling because this is a raceabout. Once you sit in one of these cars and you get behind the wheel, you're going to feel like in a more modern, I wouldn't say sports car, but a sporty, racier, speedy car. You feel really tight. These seats really hug you in. It has a hand throttle and a foot throttle, spark advance, battery to start, switch over to magneto, and a 2-speed planetary transmission. It's quite amazing how these vehicles came about in the idea of how fast they progressed in terms of their manufacturing. If you look at any new, that's one of the things that me personally I look at is take the technology away, say automobile, replace the word automobile with computer, replace the word computer with cell phone. At any time in any new technology, the new technology comes along and people see the future, but it takes a while to catch on. Here's a new cell phone. Why do I need that thing? I remember when I got our first computer in the early 80s, like we played around with it, but what good does this do? We can't do anything with it. The automobile kind of follows that path. People made automobiles, a lot of manufacturers, they all went bankrupt. People are switching names back and forth. This guy wants to protect his investment. This kind of comes out. You look at the Overland, the Willys Corporation, they had 4 or 5 people in the first 4 or 5 years. Henry Ford's the same way. But once it catches on and it becomes palatable to the public at a price point where they can use it, and it's going to be reliable, we're off and running. If you continue with John North Willys was one of the first people, along with Will Durant, to set up an idea of having holding companies and automobile companies buying other automobile companies. Duesenberg, for example, is famous with Indiana because the Duesenberg brothers raced at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but they were manufactured in Indiana by the Cord Corporation eventually. Well, John North Willys bought Duesenberg in the late teens because he wanted their factory in New Jersey. Eventually, when that went, the Cord Corporation bought them back. But he had formed from New York to Ohio, to Indiana to Ohio. He had formed by the early 1920s a corporation that had multiple automobile manufacturers, multiple machine shops, multiple other corporations into one big kind of conglomerate. So he kind of set the stage for what was to come. If you look who came after him, look at Walter P. Chrysler, the empire he built at the end of the 20th century. Walter Chrysler was one of the people that came in the late teens, early 20s to help save Willys Overland in the post-World War I financial collapse and reorganize it. And he followed suit with those things. It's really neat when you look at the automobile and then also look at the people and the investors or how they interacted and how they were involved to bring these things to light. One thing about these is they are not yet what I would call demountable. We kind of how things evolve. So if you're going to change this tire, you either have to be able to do it right on the wheel, or you take the wheel nut off of the wheel bearing, take the whole wheel off and change the tire. If you walk around, there's a 1912 Cadillac, and you can see where there's 6 bolts holding the wheel rim on. So that was like a next advancement where rather than having to take the whole tire off on the side of the road, we could have a spare and swap it out. So you see here, they have a spare tire mounted, but you don't see your wheel rim because if you had a flat tire, you'd actually have to pop this whole wheel off and put the inner tube back in, which is a pain in the butt. But then the demountable rims became a really big advantage. And everyone talks about improving transportation and the cars and everything in this era. The one forgotten aspect is it really comes down to tires. I mean, I can make this theory, this is my opinion, the single most important physical component of any automobile, the most important part is the tire or the wheel. It's the only thing on the car that makes contact with the road. And what you're doing is driving on a road or the ground. So if it's the only thing that makes contact, therefore it is the most important part. And you'd have stories, it would be the reliability of the automobile. And we have some vehicles around here. We run them at Owl's Head. You know, we have 19.5, 19.6, 19.7 automobiles that can do 60, 70 miles an hour. So the reliability of the mechanics became phenomenal. And that's in the name. Oh, Overland. Okay, cool. If this is the Overland, then I want to take it to go Overland. Sometimes it's that simple. But if you're going 10, 15 miles and having 4 or 5 flat tires, I mean, he's passed away now, but a longtime family friend, when I was a little kid telling stories at lunch in Rockland at the Wayfarer Hotel with my dad, he told a story about him and his mother and sister went to go see his aunt from Rockland to Rockport. They got as far as Glen Cove and Powerhouse Hill by the hospital. They had 4 flat tires and said, forget this, and went home. But that was automobile travel in rural America in 1915. Now, the wood, one thing that we think, oh my God, they're wood tires. Well, these are made out of very hardwood, oak, ash, hickory, things like that. You don't have really high speeds, high turns, but you will start to see by around, you'll see wooden wheels, for example, Model Ts and things up through the 20s. But you see a lot of vehicles that as they improved their technology and they got faster, you'll see a lot of wire wheels start coming in too. And that is starting to take over. Eventually you'll see metal wheels and rims that way. So, and today we've gone back to, we don't have demountable wheels, rims anymore. We have whole wheels. You take the whole wheel off and change the tire. But the wheel bearing assembly stays in the wheel is separate. We have machines that kind of, so some things bend effects over time. But these here, these are gasoline powered lights. Or actually I should say acetylene gas. So down here is a tank. If you look at a lot of other automobiles, here's one here. Electric lights. Electricity is a well-known technology, but it's very finicky in terms of automotive applications. So gas is understood. You'd have the carbide generator here. You would have basic high school. Actually, I would do better in high school chemistry today if I could learn it through automobile applications and then retranslate it. You have carbide crystals, and you would have water, and you turn a valve, and when water drips on carbide crystals, the chemical reaction creates acetylene gas. And that acetylene gas would then be piped through. You open the valve and pressure, and you light the lights. Or, and this happens sometimes too, you would have a this tank. You would go to an acetylene, like helium. You'd pump it full of acetylene gas and charge it before you go. So some cars had carbide generators. This one to me looks more along. It actually says Besto Light or Presto Light. So this to me looks like one that you would charge with acetylene before you went, and then you would use it that way. What's really neat about this is this has a pressurized oil system. So you have an oil tank here and a sight gauge. You fill this up, and yes, you'd have oil in the crankcase, and it would probably be a splash system, but it also is connected. And these little rods here would have pumps inside that go up and down as it goes, and it would also pressurize oil to each individual bearing, which is a really advanced idea for the time. Currently, right now, everyone says, every car at Owl's Head runs. I think in theory, they do. Some more runnable than others. Some it's been a while since we ran them. This vehicle, I don't think we have run in a really long time. It might be one eventually we keep rotating them through. We have so many wonderful automobiles here in the museum, and sometimes some things get kind of put in the corner, and that's where this Willys Overland is right now. But I think it's important to note that the Overland story is extremely significant to the development of automobile transportation in the United States. And it goes far beyond just the car. It takes foresight, insight. One company seeing the future, John Willys North, a bicycle salesman, says, I think this is the future. It's really a neat story. So I hope everyone enjoyed that little spiel. And don't underestimate the names on the front of these machines, because the names have as much meaning or more of these machines and how they came about. There's reasons in them. Thanks everyone for listening, and come see us at Owl's Head.